I always figured I had a pretty good handle on my life, my wife, and the world we built together. Life had rolled out so predictably that I never thought to question it. We've been hitched for almost 30 years. Over that time, we'd made a home, faced some tough times, and settled into a routine that wasn't flashy but worked for us. There wasn't much excitement or chaos, just the two of us, getting by, living our steady, quiet life. Our place, tucked on the edge of town, was simple. Nothing fancy or over the top, but it was ours. A small, tidy backyard garden, a comfy living room where we'd chill in the evenings, a kitchen where she'd whip up the dinners I'd gotten used to over the years. The house wasn't big, but it suited us fine, just enough for me and her. We never wanted kids, never saw the point. Our life was our own, and that was always enough. She taught at a school nearby, a job that kept her busy and brought in steady cash. I worked a desk job at a local company. It wasn't thrilling, but it kept the bills paid. We were doing all right, not rich, but not scraping by either. Our days were routine. Mornings, we'd get up. I'd head to work. She'd go to school. Evenings were the same: dinner, some TV, a little chit-chat, then bed. Weekends were a bit livelier. Maybe hitting the farmer's market or strolling around the block. Nothing wild, but it was good enough. Back then, I never thought to question if this was how things should be. This was life: steady, reliable, no surprises. That's what we built everything on. Nothing crazy, but it was ours. We'd grown old together, and I figured I knew her inside and out, that our connection was rock solid. Then one day, she brought him up. I didn't think much of it at first, but that's when things started shifting. She casually mentioned that an old friend from way back was coming to town. Some guy she knew before me, a high school fling. They hadn't talked in years, but he wanted to catch up. I didn't see any reason to worry. Just two old buddies reconnecting. They had their history, I had mine. We were grown-ups, so I didn't think twice about it. She'd always had old friends pop in and out of her life. This seemed like more of the same. But as time went on, I started picking up on little things that, looking back, should have tipped me off. I didn't make much of them at first. She was on her phone more, texting him a lot, stepping away when I came into the room. She'd mention him more often, always talking about old times or catching up, but I could sense something off in the air. It wasn't obvious, nothing in your face that screamed trouble, but something felt wrong. I tried to brush it off at first. We'd always trusted each other completely. She'd never given me a reason to doubt her, and I had no cause to suspect anything shady. But my gut started knotting up with a weird feeling I couldn't shake. I'd never been the type to overthink things. My life was simple, and I liked it that way. I didn't go looking for drama or problems where there weren't any. I'd always trusted her completely, and she'd never let me down. So why would I start questioning her now? Still, that nagging feeling wouldn't quit. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that everything was fine. The phone calls got more frequent. The text seemed longer, more personal. I noticed her smiling more when she talked about him. And then there were the lunches, just the two of them, catching up. No big deal, right? But every time she came back from one of those meetups, she seemed different. A little too happy, a little too far away. There was a spark in her voice when she mentioned him, something new I hadn't heard before. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just old friends hanging out. What's the harm in that? Days went by, and I started paying closer attention, unable to shake that growing unease. There was no solid proof, no clear reason to think anything was wrong, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. It was small, hard to pin down, but it was there. It felt like she was drifting away from me, bit by bit, as she reconnected with this guy from her past. We kept up our usual routine, but everything held us. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a distance I'd never felt before. The thing is, I trusted her. Always had. There'd never been a reason not to. She'd always been my rock, my partner. I had no cause to doubt her. But there was this vibe I couldn't shake. I couldn't put a name to it yet, but something felt different, like trouble was brewing. It was like the quiet before a big storm. I had no clue how much my world was about to flip upside down. What used to be a solid, steady life was starting to feel like it was built on shaky ground. As days went by, the changes got clearer. Her phone calls, once no big deal, were getting longer, more serious. It wasn't just how often she was on the phone, but how she acted when she talked about him. There was a softness in her tone, a tine of warmth I hadn't heard before. Even when she was just chatting about random stuff, I could tell. Her smile was different, with a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in ages. It was small, but it was there. I tried to brush it off. I wanted to believe it was nothing. They had a past, right? History from before me. She'd always talked about it. Stuff they did as kids, moments they shared before we met. Nothing wrong with catching up with an old friend. But as weeks passed, I started wondering if there was more to their connection than just old times. One night, after she got back from one of their meetups, I couldn't ignore how different she seemed. Her usual energy was there, the way she laughed, moved around the house. But something was off. When she grabbed my hand, there was a slight hesitation, something new. She wasn't exactly distant, but the way she acted around me had changed. I couldn't quite pin it down. It was more noticeable at dinner. We talked like always, her day, my job, the usual stuff. But there was this gap in her luck. Not cold, but like she was holding something back. She was right there with me, but her mind, her heart, seemed somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't get to. It didn't help that she was in such a great mood, almost glowing in a way I hadn't seen before. She'd always been pretty, but now there was this new vibe and energy that wasn't just her usual warmth. As much as I wanted to chalk it up to being happy about seeing an old buddy, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the one making her smile like that anymore. One night, after she went to bed, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wide awake. I'd always slept like a rock, but now I was tossing and turning, my mind racing. I kept wondering if I'd missed something, if I'd been blind to the signs. Maybe I was just being paranoid, letting my own doubts get to me. But deep down, I knew something was up. I'd always been able to read her, to sense when things were off, and right now, everything felt wrong. I tried to let it go, to focus on the life we built, but that uneasy feeling kept growing, sinking into my chest. The next week, I got a chance to see things up close. I was supposed to go on a work trip, but it fell through, so I stayed home. I didn't want to doubt her or their meetups, but something in me needed to know. I'd never been the guy to snoop on his wife. That wasn't me. But a little voice told me this wasn't as harmless as it seemed. I watched as she got ready for another lunch with him. She dressed with more care that day. I told myself she wasn't trying to impress anyone, but the way she moved, the way she fixed her shirt before heading out, caught my eye. Her hair was neater, her makeup just a bit sharper. She wasn't doing it for me, that much I knew. She was meeting him. I didn't say a word. She left with her usual casual vibe, and I watched her go, my stomach churning in a way I couldn't explain. She didn't see me watching, didn't notice the knot in my gut as I realized I wasn't the center of her world right then. When she got back that afternoon, she seemed lighter. She smiled, sure, but it wasn't the same smile she gave me. It was warmer, more real. She was happier than I'd seen her in weeks. I tried to ignore it, to push down the unease growing in my chest as she walked in, but I couldn't. It felt like she was carrying a kind of joy, a lightness, that wasn't for me. I greeted her like always, asking about her day, the lunch. She answered, but there was a slight pause in her voice. She wasn't hiding anything outright, but she wasn't being totally open either. There was a hint of caution in her words, something guarded I hadn't seen before. She told me about their time together, the old memories they shared, and what they've been up to since they last talked. But in her eyes, I saw something else, something that wasn't mine. That's when it hit me. I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't just a friendly catch-up. There was more going on, stuff she wasn't telling me. As the days went on, it became clear. Her smiles, her vibe, the way she talked to me, it was all different. Not because she didn't care about me, but because she was giving something to him that she used to give to me, something I thought would always be there. Now, I wasn't so sure. There was a closeness when she talked about him, a bond one couldn't ignore, even if I didn't know the whole story. And there I was, stuck on the sidelines, wondering when I stopped being enough. I never thought I'd be the guy to snoop on his wife, to dig for proof of something I wasn't ready to deal with. But one night, as our quiet routine dragged on, something snapped. The nagging doubt that had been eating at me for weeks finally boiled over. I got home early from work that day, which wasn't normal for me. No real reason, just a restless feeling I couldn't shake. When I walked in, the house felt off, too quiet. It wasn't unusual, but tonight it felt wrong. I dropped my bag by the door and headed to the living room. The usual stuff, her books neatly stacked, our family photos on the wall, didn't feel comforting anymore. The house didn't feel like ours. It felt like I didn't belong. I figured I'd wait. Maybe I was making too much of it. Maybe the distance between us wasn't as big as I thought. I could have been wrong about how she talked, the little changes in how she acted. Maybe I was just being too sensitive, caught up in my own head. I sat in my usual chair, hands on my knees, waiting for her to get home. Hours dragged by. The clock on the wall kept ticking, each minute feeling longer than it should. She was late. She wasn't the type to stay out this late without a heads up. I'd always trusted her to keep me in the loop, to share the small stuff about her day. But tonight, it felt off. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through messages, and then I sighed. A text from her. Short, like the one she always sent, but this one felt different. There was something about it that caught me off guard. Running late. Pumped soon. I stared at the words, a weird heaviness settling in my chest. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. No warmth, just short, and to the point. It felt canned, and that was enough to push me over the edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that this wasn't just another night. So, without overthinking it, I grabbed my jacket and headed out. I told myself I was just checking on her, making sure she was okay. Nothing more. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. I was following that gut feeling that had been gnawing at me for weeks. I drove in silence, my mind racing with what I might find. The streets were dark and quiet, but the weight of what was coming felt heavy. I didn't know exactly where she was, but I had a good guess. She'd been meeting him more often, always at the same restaurant, a quiet place where they could talk and catch up. Part of me hated the idea, but the part that was drowning in doubt needed to see it for myself. When I got there, the restaurant was nearly empty. I parked in the lot, sitting for a moment in the quiet, watching the lights inside flicker as people came and went. My heart was pounding, and I told myself to chill out. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. But then, to the window, I saw them. They were sitting in a corner booth, just the two of them. She was leaning in a bit, facing him. They were talking, their faces close. She was laughing, a sound that used to fill our home, but now felt like it belonged to someone else. The way her eyes lit up, the way her smile curved, it wasn't the smile I knew. It was different. A smile that hadn't been in our house for weeks, maybe months. And then I saw it, the touch. She reached across the table, and he took her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers in a way that was close, quiet, but clear as day. It looked so natural, so easy, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't the guy she shared those moments with anymore. I sat in my car, frozen, staring through the window. Time dragged on, and all I could hear was my own breathing, quick and shallow, like the world had gone quiet. I watched them for what felt like forever, but it was clear as day. They weren't just friends. There was no mistaking it. They were something more. I don't know how long I stayed there before I finally turned the key and started the engine. My hands were shaky on the wheel. The drive home was a haze. My head was all over the place, unsure what to do with the truth burning inside me. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was a lie. When I got home, I sat in the dark, staring at the walls. I didn't know how to react or what to say. My thoughts were a mess, spinning out of control. Yeah, I was mad, but more than that, I was crushed. I thought I knew her. I thought we had something solid. But now, all I felt was the sting of betrayal weighing me down. The life I thought we had was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to hold on. She came home a couple hours later, her steps light, but there was a cautious look in her eyes I hadn't seen before. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. We both knew what was up. The truth was out, and we couldn't pretend anymore. The woman I loved, the one I trusted with everything, wasn't the same woman standing in front of me, and I had no clue where to go from there. The weight of what I saw that night didn't go away. It stuck with me, eating at me, poisoning every thought. She betrayed me. She'd given herself to him, and I saw it with my own eyes. The image of their hands locked together, the way she leaned toward him, those smiles and looks, it played on repeat in my head, mocking me. The warmth I used to feel when I looked at her was gone, replaced by a cold, heavy emptiness. But worse than the betrayal was knowing she'd kept it from me for so long. That cut the deepest. I wasn't the type to lose my cool or act without thinking, but this was different. My whole world had flipped, and I wasn't the same guy anymore. Anger took hold, and with it came a need to get even. The days after were a blur. I barely talked to her, barely looked at her. Every time I saw her, all I could picture was the woman who'd lied to me, who'd shared herself with someone else. The house felt like it was closing in, suffocating me as I figured out what I had to do. He was still around, still meeting her, still taking what used to be mine. But I knew what needed to happen. He couldn't keep going like this. No one could. I started getting what I needed for payback. It wasn't something I decided lightly, but it felt like my only option. My head was clouded with rage, and the idea of just talking to him, all calm and civil, seemed pointless. No, this had to be bigger. It had to be final. I'd never handled a gun before, but I wasn't dumb. I figured out how to get one, how to make sure it would work. It was a small thing, simple, but it'd get the job done. I thought about it all the time, aware, when, how. I was sure of it. He was gonna pay. Then there was her. My wife, the woman I'd spent decades with. She was part of this too. She betrayed me in the worst way, and I couldn't let her walk away without feeling it. She needed to know the pain she'd caused, to feel the same sting she'd put me. It wasn't just about punishing her. It was about taking back what she'd taken from me. I waited for the right time, the perfect chance to act. I didn't know how long I could keep pretending everything was fine, acting like the guy she used to know. But it didn't matter. I'd stay quiet until the moment was right. Then it came, another night, another evening which she'd be with. I didn't know exactly where, but I had a good guess. That same quiet restaurant, those same empty tables. I'd be there, waiting. I got there early, sticking to the shadows, didn't just enough to see them when they showed up. My heart was racing, the anticipation tightening around me like a noose. I kept my eyes on the door, never looking away, getting myself ready. Then there they were. She walked in first, flashing that same smile I'd seen before, the one that wasn't for me. He was right behind her, too close for my liking. Seeing them together made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to stay cool. This was it. I stood up, checking the gun at my side. No one saw me. I made sure of that. The buzz of the restaurant, the chatter, covered my steps. I was invisible, moving quietly, unseen. I moved toward them, steady and slow. By the time they noticed me, it was already too late. He didn't even get a chance to move before I fired. The shot was loud, sharp, and final. I didn't hesitate, didn't second guess. He collapsed, shock frozen on his face as he hit the floor. Dawn. Her scream cut through the air. It wasn't just fear, it was the sound of her realizing what just happened. She stared at me, pale and stunned, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Regret, panic. But it didn't matter. Nothing did anymore. I turned to her, gun still tight in my hand. my heart racing with adrenaline. She stood there, shaking, her mouth open like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. She was out of words. I stepped closer, my voice low and steady, even though I was a mess inside. "You thought you could play us both," I said, cold as ice. "You thought you could lie to me, use me, and I'd never catch on, but I saw it all. Now you'll know what it's like to lose everything." She tried to speak, maybe to beg, but I didn't let her. I'd been waiting for this. Now it was time to make her feel the same hurt she'd put me through. I got closer, staring at her with eyes that had long stopped seeing love and now held something darker. I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward me with a grip she couldn't fight. She was shaking, weak under my hold. The fear in her eyes was real, but it didn't do anything for me. It didn't erase the years of lies, the hollow ache inside me. "I gave you my whole world," I whispered, my grip tightening. "And this is how you pay me back?" She couldn't respond. She was frozen, stuck in her own guilt, facing what she'd done. But it didn't matter. She'd broken me. Now it was my turn to break her. The silence that hit was heavy, and as I looked at her, everything else seemed to fade. There was no going back. I'd crossed a line, and there was no fixing what I'd done. It sank in. I'd done it. I'd taken back what was mine, and I'd never be the same guy again. The air in the restaurant was thick, heavy with tension. The once lively place now felt like a graveyard, the dim lights casting dark shadows over everything. I stood there, gun still in my hand, my pulse pounding in my ears. My body was stiff, locked in place, as the weight of what I'd done settled over me like a heavy blanket. She stood across from me, her face white, as white with shock. She used to be my everything. Now she was just some woman who'd betrayed me, part of a life I'd worked so hard to build, now smashed to pieces. Her actions hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Her choice to share herself with another guy was out in the open. The woman who'd promised to stick by me through thick and thin had picked someone else. Her betrayal wasn't just about trust. It was about everything we'd built, every moment we'd shared. The love I had for her was gone, replaced by something cold and sharp. She didn't say a word, but her presence said enough. The coldness in her eyes, the shaking in her hands, told me she knew what she'd done. She knew there was no undoing it, but it didn't matter. Nothing did. She'd made her choice, and now she'd face the consequences. I turned away from her, moving slow and steady. I didn't need to look at her anymore. There was nothing left to say. The raw pain of her betrayal had dulled into something colder, more calculated. The gun in my hand felt heavy, but it didn't feel strange anymore. It felt like part of the anger that had taken over, like the tool to set things right, the only justice I'd left. As I headed for the door, I caught a hint of movement behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel her staring, her gaze burning into me. But I wasn't stopping. My path was set, and nothing was going to pull me off it. I'd done what I had to, and now I was leaving it all behind. The silence was crushing. It pressed down on me, but I didn't feel regret or guilt like some other guy might. No, for me, it was freedom. Freedom from her lies. Freedom from the life we'd had. Freedom from the guy who took what was mine. It was a strange kind of freedom, but it was mine. I stepped out into the night, the chilly air hitting my lungs, pulling me back to what had just gone down. The city around me felt far away, like I was walking through some kind of fog, cut off from the life I used to know. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd taken charge. I'd made my moves, and now the pieces of my broken life were starting to come together again. The night kept replaying in my head. Every second burned into my brain. The shot, his collapse, her scream, the weight of it all. I'd gotten my payback. But even as the feeling lingered, part of me knew I'd never be the same guy. I crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The road ahead was a mystery, but for the first time in forever, I felt clear-headed. The anger that had taken over was cooling off, replaced by something else. A grim kind of peace. A sense of being done. I'd done what I had to, and now it was time to walk away. I wasn't going back to who I was, and I didn't want to. I'd faced what she did to me, and in doing that, I'd taken back a piece of myself. The love I used to have for her was gone, replaced by a hard, cold sense of closure. The pillars of the earth had fallen with her betrayal, but I was different now. Stronger. Tougher. As I walked away from that place, I knew whatever came next, I'd face it head on. There was no fear left in me, just the cold, hard truth of what I'd done and the certainty that I'd never let myself be broken again. I'd gotten my revenge. I'd done what needed doing. And now, the world would have to deal with the man I'd become. And that's the end of the story for now. If you like this ride, give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more stories like this. Got any thoughts or stories of your own? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Thanks for reading, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe.